Another thrilling tale of hidden strength comes your way today, as I bring you the extraordinary story of a humble blacksmith whose peaceful life is shattered when dangerous thugs corner him in his own forge. But these criminals are about to learn a harsh lesson. Never judge a man by his trade. Because this simple craftsman harbors a deadly secret. He was once the most feared duel champion in all of Europe. Sit back and prepare yourself for an epic tale of honor, redemption, and justice served at the edge of a blade. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The tale I'm about to tell you begins in the autumn of 1875, when America was still healing from its deepest wounds, and small towns like Millbrook were caught between the old world and the new. Here, where the railroad had only recently carved its path through Pennsylvania's rolling hills, tradition and progress danced an uneasy waltz. The early morning mist clings to the cobblestone streets of Millbrook, a quaint trading town nestled in the rolling hills of 1875 Pennsylvania. As the sun begins to pierce through the fog, the rhythmic ring of hammer-striking steel already echoes from the corner of Mason and Pine Streets, where the weathered sign of Thorne's Forge swings gently in the autumn breeze. Inside the workshop, Marcus Thorne works with the precision of a surgeon and the strength of a bear. His calloused hands, marked by countless burns and scars, guide the glowing metal with practiced ease. At 53 years old, his dark hair may be streaked with silver, but his arms remain as powerful as ever, shaped by 3 decades of honest labor at the forge. His young apprentice, Will Foster, watches in admiration as Marcus demonstrates the delicate art of tempering a blade. "Notice how the steel changes color, lad," Marcus explains, his deep voice carrying the slight hint of a German accent he never quite shed. "When it turns that perfect shade of straw yellow, that's when you know." The morning light streaming through. The workshop's windows catches something unusual mounted on the far wall, an elegant dueling saber in an ornate scabbard, its brass hilt gleaming despite its age. Will has always wondered about that sword, but Marcus never speaks of it. The only other hint of Marcus's past life sits in a small wooden box on a high shelf, a medallion bearing the seal of the Royal Fencing Academy of Dresden. The peaceful scene is briefly interrupted by the arrival of Marcus's daughter, Isabella, known to everyone as Bella. She enters carrying a basket of fresh bread and her father's midday meal. "Papa, have you heard the news?" she asks, her usual cheerful demeanor tinged with concern. Clara says more shops were visited by those men again last night. The Cooper's mill was completely ransacked when they refused to pay. Marcus's hands pause briefly over his work, a shadow crossing his weathered face. Sheriff Cooper still hasn't found who's responsible. "He claims his hands are tied without proof," Bella responds, setting down the basket. "But everyone knows it's those newcomers who took over the old Mason warehouse. They're calling themselves legitimate businessmen, but Mrs. Foster says she's seen them carrying weapons." Will's mother, Sarah Foster, runs the bakery next door, and her window provides a clear view of the warehouse in question. A widow who lost her husband in the war's final days, Sarah has raised Will alone, finding an unlikely ally in Marcus, who took her son as his apprentice when others might have hesitated to train a fatherless boy. Over the past month, she's noticed increasing activity at the warehouse, with rough-looking men coming and going at all hours, their Eastern European accents carrying across the street in harsh whispers. The warehouse itself stands as a testament to Millbrook's changing fortunes. Once the proud Mason family's center of commerce, it now bears the scars of neglect. Broken windows poorly boarded up, weathered walls crying out for paint, and the occasional glint of lamplight behind shuttered windows at midnight. The townsfolk whisper that Viktor Kovalev and his men claimed it for a pittance from the Mason family's debt-ridden heir, though few dare to speak such gossip above a whisper. "Times are changing," Marcus says quietly, returning to his work. "Sometimes The best course is to keep one's head down and focus on honest labor. But as he speaks these words, his eyes drift momentarily to that mounted saber, and something flickers in their depths. Something that suggests he hasn't always followed his own advice. The morning progresses with its usual routine. Regular customers come and go. Farmers needing plowshares repaired, townspeople bringing household items that need mending. Marcus treats each piece with the same careful attention, whether it's a simple pot or an elaborate gate hinge. Around midday, Clara Weber, the tavern owner, hurries in. Her father, old Master Heinrich, had been Marcus's closest friend since his arrival in Millbrook 15 years ago, and she's become like family. "Marcus," she says, slightly out of breath, "they're moving through town again. Victor and his men. They're collecting their protection fees, and they're being less polite about it than last time." Marcus nods slowly, wiping his hands on his leather apron. "Thank you for the warning, Clara." He turns to Will. "Lad, why don't you take an early lunch? Go help your mother at the bakery." Will begins to protest, but something in Marcus's tone makes him hold his tongue. As he leaves through the back door, he catches a glimpse of his master moving toward that mounted saber, carefully running a cloth along its scabbard, as though preparing it for something more than just its usual dusting. The air in the forge grows thick with tension, like the moment before a storm breaks. Marcus returns to his anvil, continuing his work with the same steady rhythm, but his movements have taken on a different quality. More measured, more precise, like a man who knows exactly what's coming and is simply waiting for it to arrive. Through the forge's front windows, shadows begin to move in the street, and the usual bustle of town life grows quiet, as though the whole world is holding its breath for what's about to unfold. The last customer, old Farmer Jenkins, hurriedly limps away with his mended plow blade, casting nervous glances over his shoulder. Marcus moves to the forge's basin, washing his hands with deliberate care. As he does so, his sleeve rides up slightly, revealing an unusual scar on his forearm, not the round burns of forge work, but a long, clean line that could only have come from a blade. In the wavering light of the forge, other similar marks become visible on his arms, each telling its own story of duels long past. He reaches for a worn, leather-bound book beneath the counter, its pages filled with neat columns of German script. To most, it would appear to be nothing more than a ledger of accounts, but hidden between the lines of transactions and materials are other notes, observations about balance points, blade angles, and the subtle art of reading an opponent's intent in the moment before they strike. The mounted saber on the wall catches a ray of sunlight, sending a bright reflection dancing across the workshop. For a moment, Marcus's weathered face softens as he gazes at it, lost in memories of another life. Another time. Then his expression hardens, and his fingers unconsciously trace the pattern of an old dueling callus on his palm, one that 15 years of blacksmith work never quite erased. In the distance, a church bell tolls noon, its deep resonance mixing with the last echoes of hammer on anvil. The stage is set, the players are moving into position, and soon, very soon, the peaceful facade of Thorn's Forge will shatter like glass against steel. The sound of boots on cobblestones breaks the midday quiet, their heavy rhythm echoing off Millbrook's weathered buildings like distant thunder. 3 men approach Thorn's Forge, their very presence causing shutters to close and townspeople to hurry inside. At their head walks Victor Kovalev, a man whose elegant suit and polished walking stick belie the brutality in his pale eyes. Victor cuts an imposing figure, tall and lean, with sharp Slavic features and a meticulously trimmed beard. His right hand bears an ornate silver ring that catches the sunlight, while his left grips a walking stick topped with a brass wolf's head. Those who look closely might notice that the stick's worn grip suggests frequent use as something other than a walking aid. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Flanking him are his two most trusted enforcers. Ivan, a mountain of a man whose massive frame stretches his black coat to its limits, carries a leather satchel that clinks ominously with each step. His knuckles, scarred and misshapen, tell stories of countless business negotiations gone violent. On Victor's other side, Dmitri moves with the nervous energy of a caged animal, his thin face marked by a perpetual sneer and a fresh scar across his left cheek, a souvenir from a recent discussion with a reluctant shopkeeper. As they pass Sarah Foster's bakery, Victor pauses, inhaling the scent of fresh bread. "Ah, the sweet smell of prosperity," he says, his accent thick but precise. "Perhaps we should pay our respects to the widow Foster next, yes?" Ivan chuckles darkly, but they continue toward the forge. Through the forge's windows, Marcus watches. Their approach with the steady gaze of a man who has faced danger before. His hands move automatically, arranging his tools with deliberate care, hammer here, tongs there, each placed just within reach. To an observer, it might appear he's simply tidying his workspace. To a trained eye, he's positioning potential weapons. The bell above the door chimes as Victor enters, followed by his men. The forge's heat hits them like a wall, but while Ivan and Dmitri show discomfort, Victor appears unbothered. He surveys the workshop with the calculated interest of a man assessing property values. "Master Thorne," Victor says, removing his gloves with practiced elegance, "your reputation precedes you. They say there isn't a finer craftsman between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh." He picks up a recently finished horseshoe, examining it with exaggerated appreciation. "Such quality work deserves protection in these uncertain times, wouldn't you agree?" Marcus continues his work, hammering a piece of glowing metal with measured strikes. "My work protects itself, Mr. Kovalev, as it has for 15 years. Victor's smile doesn't reach his eyes. "Ah, but times change, my friend. America is growing. Progress brings complications. Surely you've heard about the unfortunate accidents at Cooper's Mill, the fire at the Thompson place." He sets the horseshoe down with deliberate care. Insurance, you might say, is becoming a necessity. Behind Victor, Ivan opens his satchel, producing a ledger bound in dark leather. The same ledger that's been seen in shops all across Millbrook, recording debts that somehow never seem to decrease despite regular payments. "I'm offering you a favorable rate," Victor continues, "out of respect for your craft, just $30 a month. Quite reasonable for such a profitable establishment." His eyes drift to the elegant saber mounted on the wall, and his expression changes subtly. That's an interesting piece. The workmanship appears European. Dresden school. Perhaps? Marcus's hammer pauses mid-strike, almost imperceptibly. "It's just an old decoration, nothing more." "Of course," Victor says smoothly, but his eyes narrow slightly. "Though I once knew a man in St. Petersburg who spoke of a legendary duelist from Dresden. They called him der Schwarze Falke, the Black Falcon. His blade work was said to be," he pauses, choosing his words carefully, "artistic," until he disappeared after a rather controversial match. The air in the forge grows heavier, charged with unspoken tensions. Dmitri shifts uneasily, sensing the change but not understanding its source. Ivan's massive hand moves closer to the cudgel concealed beneath his coat. Marcus sets down his hammer and finally turns to face Victor fully. "My answer is no, Mr. Kovalev. I have no need for your protection." Victor's pleasant demeanor hardens. "Everyone needs protection, Master Thorne. Even an old..." He glances again at the saber. "Blacksmith." The last word carries a weight of skepticism. "We'll return tomorrow for your first payment. Do consider carefully. It would be a shame if something were to happen to this beautiful forge, or to your daughter's flower shop across town." The threat hangs in the air like smoke. Marcus's expression doesn't change, but something dangerous flickers in his eyes, a glimpse of steel beneath wool. "Good day, gentlemen," he says quietly. turning back to his forge. As they leave, Victor pauses in the doorway. "One more thing, Master Thorn. That young apprentice of yours, Will, isn't it? A fatherless boy needs proper guidance. It would be tragic if he fell in with the wrong sort of people." The door closes behind them, and Marcus stands motionless before his forge, watching the metal cool from bright orange to dull red. His reflection in a hanging shield shows a face carved from stone, but his hands have shifted their grip on the tongs ever so slightly, holding them now as one might hold a sword. As evening approaches, Millbrook takes on the amber hues of sunset, but the usual peace of dusk is absent from Thorn's forge. Marcus stands at his workbench, methodically cleaning his tools while his mind races through the implications of Victor's threats. The saber on the wall seems to mock him with memories of a past he thought he'd left behind in Dresden. The back door creaks open, and Clara Weber enters, her face etched with concern. "I saw them leaving, Marcus. The whole town's talking." She sets a bottle of her father's schnapps on the workbench, their old ritual whenever trouble looms. "Heinrich always said you'd need this again someday." Marcus manages a slight smile. "Your father was a wise man, Clara, perhaps too wise." He pours 2 small glasses, his movements precise despite his worker's hands. "Did I ever tell you how Heinrich found me that night 15 years ago?" "Only pieces," Clara replies, accepting the glass. "Father never spoke of it fully." Marcus stares into his drink, lost in memory. "I was half dead in an alley behind his tavern. 3 men had followed. Me from New York, bounty hunters hired by someone from my past. Heinrich didn't ask questions, just took me in, helped me establish myself here." He sets down his untouched glass. "Now I've brought danger to his daughter's door." "We're already in danger, Marcus. The whole town is." Clara's voice hardens. "Victor's men broke Thomas Miller's arm yesterday when he couldn't pay. Sheriff Cooper does nothing. They've bought him with money or fear. The forge's dying light catches the edge of the mounted saber, drawing both their eyes." Clara steps closer to it, reaching out but not quite touching the blade. "Father told me once, before he passed, that he never regretted helping you. He said sometimes a town needs more than just a blacksmith." Their conversation is interrupted by the sound of running feet. Will bursts through the door, out of breath and wild-eyed. "Master Thorn! They're at my mother's bakery." Marcus moves with surprising speed for his age, grabbing his heavy leather apron. "Stay here," he commands, but Will is already following him out the door. Clara calls after them. "Marcus, be careful! They're not men who fight with honor." The evening air carries the sound of breaking glass and Sarah Foster's frightened voice from the bakery next door. Marcus and Will round the corner to find Dmitri and 2 unfamiliar thugs ransacking the shop, while Ivan blocks the doorway, his massive frame filling the entrance. Sarah stands amid broken display cases and scattered bread, her face pale but defiant. "I've done nothing to deserve this. We had until tomorrow to pay." "Plans change, Mrs. Foster," Ivan rumbles, his accent thick with amusement. "Boss wants to make an example. Show the town what happens when people whisper about his business." He picks up a loaf of bread, crushing it in his enormous hand. Marcus's voice cuts through the chaos like a blade through silk. "That's enough." The simple phrase carries such authority that even Ivan turns in surprise. Marcus stands in the street, the setting sun at his back casting his shadow long across the bakery's broken threshold. Will hovers behind him, torn between fear and anger. "Ah, the concerned neighbor," Dmitri sneers, knocking over another display. "This doesn't concern you, old man. Unless..." His thin face twists into a cruel smile. "You'd like to pay the widow's debt yourself?" Marcus steps forward, his movements measured and deliberate. Those watching closely might notice how his feet position themselves, how his weight shifts. Subtle tells of a fighter's training hidden beneath a craftsman's demeanor. I said, "That's enough." Each word falls like a hammer on an anvil. You'll leave Mrs. Foster's shop. Now. Ivan steps away from the doorway, moving to tower over Marcus. Or what, Blacksmith? You'll forge us to death? The other thugs laugh, but their laughter dies quickly as they notice something strange. Marcus shows no fear. None at all. This is your only warning, Marcus says quietly, his German accent becoming more pronounced. Leave now, while you can walk out. Ivan's massive hand shoots out to grab Marcus's collar, but what happens next causes everyone in the bakery to freeze. Without seeming to move, Marcus has shifted just enough that Ivan's grasp meets empty air, and somehow the giant finds his own wrist, locked in the blacksmith's iron grip. Careful, Marcus says, his voice still quiet but carrying an edge sharp as steel. Your boss hasn't told you everything about me, has he? For a moment, tension crackles in the air like heat from a forge. Then Victor's voice cuts through the tableau. Indeed, I haven't. He stands in the doorway, a walking stick gleaming in the last rays of sunlight. Stand down, Ivan. We wouldn't want to spoil tomorrow's negotiations. Ivan yanks his hand free, his face dark with rage and embarrassment. Victor surveys the destruction with theatrical disappointment. My apologies for the overzealousness of my men, Mrs. Foster. Consider this a small preview. Tomorrow, when we visit every shop in town, I expect full cooperation. His eyes lock with Marcus's. From everyone. As Victor and his men leave, Sarah begins to weep quietly, surveying the destruction of her livelihood. Will rushes to comfort his mother, but Marcus remains rooted in place, watching Victor's retreating form with the focused intensity of a man. Making calculations, measurements of distance, angles, and the weight of consequences. Night has fallen over Millbrook, but sleep eludes its residents. In the back room of Clara's tavern, a desperate meeting unfolds. Shop owners and townspeople crowd the space, their faces illuminated by lamplight and fear. Marcus stands near the door, watching as Sheriff Cooper addresses the gathering. Everyone needs to stay calm, Cooper says, his badge gleaming dully in the lamplight. His hand nervously twists the brim of his hat. As long as we all cooperate with Mr. Kovalev's reasonable requests. Reasonable? Thomas Miller interrupts, cradling his splinted arm. They broke my arm for being a day late with their blood money. His wife pulls him back down to his seat, fearful of his rising voice. Sarah Foster stands, her normally gentle features hardened by the day's events. They destroyed my shop, Thomas. Everything my late husband and I built. She turns to Cooper, voice trembling with barely contained rage. And where were you, Sheriff? Cooper's face reddens. Now, Sarah, you know I can't be everywhere at once. Besides, Mr. Kovalev has proper documentation for his business ventures. Business ventures? Marcus's voice cuts through the babble like a cold wind. He steps forward into the lamplight. Is that what we're calling extortion now? The room falls silent. Marcus rarely speaks at town meetings, and something in his tone commands attention. Sheriff Cooper, how much? What do you mean? Cooper stutters. How much did Victor pay you to look the other way? Marcus's eyes bore into the sheriff. Or did he simply threaten your family like the rest of us? Cooper's hand drops to his gun, but the gesture seems more nervous than threatening. Now see here, Thorne. Because tomorrow, Marcus continues as if Cooper hadn't spoken, when Victor's men come to collect, they won't stop at breaking arms or destroying shops. You know that, don't you? The tavern door suddenly bursts open. Will rushes in, face flushed with exertion. They've taken Bella. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. The room erupts in gasps and murmurs as he grabs Will's shoulders. What? When? Just now. I was walking her home from the flower shop. Will's words tumble out. Victor's men appeared out of nowhere. They said it was insurance to make sure everyone cooperates tomorrow. His eyes fill with tears. I tried to stop them, Master Thorne, but Dmitri hit me and... Where? Marcus's voice is deadly quiet. The warehouse, Will replies. They took her to the warehouse. Marcus moves toward the door with purpose, but Clara blocks his path. "Marcus, wait! This is what they want. They're trying to provoke you." They succeeded. His voice carries the weight of 15 years of buried identity suddenly resurging. Sheriff Cooper steps forward, attempting to reassert authority. "Now, Thorne, let's not do anything rash. I'm sure if we talk to Mr. Kovalev." Marcus turns on him with such suddenness that Cooper stumbles back. "Either do your duty, Sheriff, or stand aside. But if you try to stop me..." The threat hangs unfinished in the air. "You'll what, old man?" A new voice draws from the doorway. Dmitri stands there, a cruel smile playing on his thin face. "The boss thought you might be planning something stupid. He sent me to deliver a message." Marcus's hands clenched into fists, but his voice remains controlled. "Where is my daughter?" "Safe. For now." Dmitri produces a folded paper. "Boss says to bring this to the warehouse, alone, in 1 hour." He tosses the paper onto a nearby table. "Oh, and bring that pretty sword from your wall. Boss is curious about it." The message delivered, Dmitri turns to leave, but pauses. "One more thing. That little girl of yours, she's got spirit. Keep saying her father will come for her." His smile widens. "Boss says to tell you that spirit can be broken." The sound that comes from Marcus's throat is barely human. Before anyone can move, he crosses the distance to Dmitri in 2 strides. The younger man reaches for his knife, but Marcus moves with a speed that belies his age. There's a crack of impact, and Dmitri flies backward through the tavern door, landing hard in the street. Marcus stands in the doorway, his stance subtly changed. Gone is the humble blacksmith's slouch, replaced by the straight-backed poise of a trained swordsman. When he speaks, his German accent is pronounced, the voice of a past self emerging. "Tell your boss I'm coming." Each word falls like a death sentence, but not in an hour now. Dmitri scrambles to his feet, blood trickling from his split lip. He backs away, genuine fear replacing his usual sneer. For the first time he's seeing what Victor suspected. The craftsman's calluses on Marcus's hands barely disguise older ones, the kind that come from years of gripping a sword. As Dmitri flees into the night, Clara approaches Marcus cautiously. "What are you going to do?" Marcus strides toward his forge, his voice carrying the cold certainty of tempered steel. "What I should have done 15 years ago. Stop running." Behind him, Will hurries to keep up. "Master Thorne, I'm coming with you." "No." Marcus's tone brooks no argument. "What's about to happen? It's not for you to see." He pauses, looking back at the gathered townspeople. "Lock your doors. Whatever you hear tonight, stay inside." The night air carries the weight of imminent violence as Marcus disappears into his forge. Through the windows, those watching see him approach the mounted saber, his hands moving with ritual certainty to lift it from its place of 15 years' rest. The Black Falcon is about to take flight once more. Inside Thorne's forge, the usual warmth of the cooling fires takes on an ominous glow. Marcus kneels before an old wooden chest he's pulled from beneath the floorboards near his anvil. Its ornate German craftsmanship barely visible beneath 15 years of accumulated dust. The brass hinges, though long unused, have been regularly oiled, a hint that despite its hidden nature, this chest was never truly forgotten. The lock clicks open with a key he's worn around his neck since arriving in Millbrook. As he lifts the lid, lamplight catches the contents. A fencer's white shirt, still crisp despite its age, and beneath it, a leather belt with peculiar attachments. Will watches from the doorway as his master methodically prepares. Gone is the familiar blacksmith's stoop. Marcus's shoulders are straight, his movements precise and elegant. He removes his heavy work shirt, revealing a torso marked with old scars, each telling its own story of Duel's past. "Master Thorne," Will starts, but Marcus cuts him off. "Tonight, Will, you'll learn why I've trained you differently from other apprentices." He begins donning the white shirt. Why did I insist you learn the exact balance of every blade we've forged? Why did I teach you to move as much as to craft? The transformation continues as Marcus fastens the leather belt, adjusts the familiar weight of the sword at his hip. When he finally turns to Will, the young apprentice almost steps back. This is not the man he's known for 3 years. Techniques I've shown you, Marcus continues, moving to the workbench where various tools lay precisely arranged. They weren't just blacksmith skills, were they? He picks up a hammer, demonstrating a familiar motion. The figure 8 pattern. I insisted you master, not for shaping horseshoes but for deflecting blade attacks. The way I taught you to angle your body while working the bellows. Will's eyes widen with understanding as years of lessons suddenly shift into new focus. They were swordsman's lessons, the footwork at the anvil, the way you insisted I learn, to work with either hand, the breathing exercises while tempering steel. Every lesson served 2 purposes, Marcus nods, setting down the hammer with deliberate care. I couldn't teach you openly, but I couldn't bear to see Heinrich's grandson grow up unable to defend himself. Your mother might never forgive me for this deception, the way I taught you to hammer, the rhythm, the precision. Marcus draws the saber, its blade catching the forge's light. Every strike calculated, every movement essential, no wasted energy. He executes a lightning-fast series of cuts through the air, the blade singing. Will watches in amazement as his master moves with impossible grace, each motion flowing into the next like water. In Dresden, Marcus says, sheathing the blade, they called this Die Sprache des Stahls, the language of steel. Every stroke, every word, every conversation. His eyes grow distant. I was once fluent. The door creaks open and Clara enters, carrying a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Father wanted you to have this when the time came. She unwraps it to reveal a second sword, its blade darker than Marcus's own. He said it was payment for a debt of honor. Marcus takes the blade reverently. Heinrich's black sword, the one he used in his final duel. He tests its balance with practiced ease. I never thought to wield it like that again. There are 12 men at the warehouse, Clara reports, armed with pistols and clubs. Victor's in the office upstairs, with Ivan. They're keeping Bella in the loading bay. Marcus nods, buckling on the second sword with practiced efficiency. The leather of the belt creaks softly, a sound that brings memories flooding back of tournament halls and dawn appointments. Will you know what to do if I don't return? The apprentice straightens, his young face set with determination. Take the papers from your strongbox to Judge Morrison in Philadelphia. Names, dates, proof of Victor's operations. The red ledger has the cipher key, written in the measurements for horseshoes. And the letters to Bella? Hidden in the false bottom of the 3rd drawer, along with your real papers from Dresden and the medal from the Kaiser himself. Will's voice carries pride mixed with concern. Everything that proves who you truly are. And protect Mrs. Foster. And Miss Clara, Will's voice firms with determination. I won't fail you, master. Marcus places a hand on Will's shoulder. You never have, lad. He turns to Clara. Heinrich would be proud of you, Clara. You've done more for this town than anyone knows. Just come back alive, she responds, her voice thick with emotion. Father always said the world was darker without the black falcon soaring. Marcus moves to the forge's front door, but pauses. Will, what's the first lesson I taught you about metalwork? That true strength isn't in the hammer, Will recites, but in knowing exactly where to strike. Good. Marcus's hand rests on the door handle. Tonight, I will teach that lesson to others. Outside, a crowd has gathered despite the late hour, keeping a fearful distance from the forge. They part like water as Marcus emerges, his white shirt ghostly in the moonlight, twin swords at his hips. Sheriff Cooper pushes through the crowd, his face flushed with panic. Thorne, don't do this. Victor's men will kill you, Marcus's voice carries clearly in the night air. They can try. He looks at the gathered townspeople, seeing the fear in their eyes. For 15 years, I've lived among you, worked beside you, hidden who I was, what I could do. His hand rests on the sabre's hilt. That ends tonight. Cooper draws his pistol with trembling hands, the silver star on his chest catching the moonlight. I can't let you... Marcus moves like lightning, his body flowing into a motion practiced thousands of times in secret during pre-dawn hours. The crowd gasps collectively as his hand becomes a blur. Before anyone can blink, Cooper's gun is spinning through the air, a perfect arc that ends with it clattering into a water barrel 20 feet away. The sheriff finds himself on his knees, a thin line of blood appearing on his cheek where Marcus's sword had kissed his flesh with surgical precision. Several women scream. A child points in wonder. Old Thomas Miller, his broken arm in a sling, whispers a prayer. They've all known Marcus Thorne for 15 years, but none of them have ever seen him move faster than a blacksmith's measured pace. This fluid grace, this deadly economy of motion. It's like watching a hawk stoop from the sky. Your badge is as false as your courage, Marcus says quietly. Then louder, to the crowd. What you see tonight, remember. Remember that there are worse things than death. Dishonor, cowardice. The slow death of the soul when good men do nothing. He starts walking toward the warehouse, his boots ringing on the cobblestones. Behind him, Will calls out, "What should—" I tell them, "Master, if they ask who you really are—" Marcus pauses, moonlight gleaming on steel. "Tell them," his voice carrying the weight of destiny finally embraced. Der Schwarze Falke has returned to hunt once more. The crowd watches in stunned silence as Marcus Thorne, no, the Black Falcon, strides into the darkness, the legend of Dresden reborn on American soil. The night holds its breath, waiting for the storm about to break. The warehouse looms against the night sky, its weathered walls illuminated by flickering lanterns. Guards patrol the perimeter, their shadows dancing on cobblestones as clouds drift. Across the moon. Through an upper window, candlelight burns in Victor's office, casting long shadows that stretch like reaching fingers into the darkness below. Marcus approaches from the shadows, his white shirt ghostly in the darkness. He moves with the silent grace of a predator, each step calculated and precise. 15 years of hiding have not dulled his instincts. If anything, they've honed them to a razor's edge. He pauses in a darkened alcove, watching the guards. Patrol patterns with the practiced eye of a master strategist. 2 men guard the main entrance, passing a bottle between them. 3 more circle the building's perimeter, while another stands watch on the loading dock. Through the gaps in the wooden walls, Marcus catches glimpses of movement inside. At least 6 more men, their shapes distorted by lamplight and shadow. From his position, he can hear Dimitri's voice drifting down from above, still shaken from their earlier encounter. "I'm telling you, Ivan, he's not just some blacksmith. The way he moved—" Ivan's deep rumble cuts him off. "Shut up. Boss wants quiet. Says he's expecting an old friend." Marcus's hand tightens on his saber hilt as Victor's cultured tones float down from the office. "Our guest arrives exactly as anticipated. The Black Falcon returns to the hunt." A pause, then. "Bella, my dear, your father is quite the fascinating man. Such a waste, hiding those talents in a provincial forge." "Bella's," voice rings out, strong despite her fear. "My father will make you regret this." "Oh, I'm counting on him trying." Victor's laugh carries an edge of anticipation. "You see, in St. Petersburg, I made quite a name for myself with a blade before. Unfortunate circumstances forced me to seek opportunities in the New World. But to cross swords with the legendary Black Falcon, that would be worth all this tedious business with your charming little town." Marcus begins his approach, keeping to the shadows. His mind catalogues every detail, the loose boards that might creak, the places where moonlight might betray his presence, the angles of attack and retreat. The weight of the two swords at his hips feels familiar, like greeting old friends. The first guard never sees him coming. Marcus's hand clamps over his mouth from behind, and a precise pressure point strike renders him unconscious. The body is lowered silently to the ground and dragged into darkness. One down. Inside the warehouse, Bella's voice rises again. "You're mad! All this just to force a duel?" Mad, perhaps. But you Americans understand so little about true combat, true honor. Your frontier duels with pistols, crude, artless things. But the dance of steel, that is poetry. Victor's voice takes on a dreamy quality. I've spent 15 years building my reputation, my little empire. But what is empire compared to legend? The second guard lights a cigarette, its glow briefly illuminating his face. The match has barely been shaken out when Marcus strikes. A whisper of movement, a choked gasp, another body hidden in shadow. Two down. He works his way around the building's exterior, eliminating the patrol with surgical precision. Each strike is economical, silent, like a master craftsman removing imperfections from his work. By the time he reaches the loading dock, 4 more guards lie unconscious in various shadowed corners. 6 down. The loading dock guard turns at the yow sound of a deliberately kicked stone. "Who's there?" His hand moves to his pistol, but freezes at the sight of Marcus standing in the moonlight, twin swords gleaming at his sides. "Tell Victor his guest has arrived," Marcus says quietly. The guard's eyes widen with recognition and fear. He opens his mouth to shout a warning, but Marcus's hand moves in a blur. The guard finds his pistol has somehow leaped from its holster into Marcus's grasp. 7 down. "Quietly now," Marcus adds, his voice carrying the weight of unstoppable purpose. "Or I demonstrate how many ways a master swordsman can end a life before a man's cry can reach his lips." The guard swallows hard, then nods. He backs toward the door, Marcus following like his own shadow. Inside, lamplight reveals crates and barrels arranged in rough aisles. Perfect terrain for what's to come. "B-Boss!" The guard calls up the stairs, his voice trembling. "He's here!" Victor appears at the top of the stairs, resplendent in a fencer's outfit of black silk. His walking stick has been replaced by an elegant rapier. Magnificent, the prodigal bladesman returns. He gestures expansively. "Welcome, Herr Thorn. Or should I say, Herr Falke? We have so much to discuss." Marcus steps into the warehouse proper, moonlight streaming through high windows to paint silver stripes across his white shirt. His voice, when it comes, carries the cold certainty of tempered steel. "Release my daughter. Now, before I paint these walls with the blood of every man here." Victor's smile widens. "Come now, where's the art in that? I propose something more. Civilized, a proper duel as they did in the old world. Your daughter's freedom against your life." He raises an eyebrow. "Unless the great black falcon has grown too comfortable in his craftsman's feathers." Marcus's response is to draw both swords, their whisper from their scabbards like the sigh of destiny finally embraced. The sound echoes through the warehouse, and every man present feels the temperature seem to drop. The hunt is about to begin. The warehouse air grows thick with tension as Victor's remaining men emerge from the shadows, forming a loose circle around Marcus. Their weapons gleam dully in the lamplight, cudgels, knives, and a few pistols. Ivan's massive form blocks the stairs leading to where Bella is held, while Dmitri circles to Marcus's left, still favoring his jaw from their earlier encounter. "Before we begin our dance," Victor calls from above. "A small demonstration, perhaps, Show my men why they should fear the Black Falcon's legend. Marcus's response is a fluid pivot as the first attacker lunges from behind. The saber in his right hand deflects a knife thrust, while the black sword in his left traces a perfect arc through the air. There's a metallic clang, and the attacker's blade goes spinning away into darkness. The man stumbles back, clutching a broken wrist. First lesson, Marcus says quietly, his German accent now pronounced. Never attack a master swordsman from behind. You'll never see what kills you. Two more men charge simultaneously. Marcus flows between them like water, his blades singing. One attacker's club is parried high, leaving him open for a precise pommel strike to the temple. The other finds his legs swept from under him by a low cut from the black sword. Both hit the floor unconscious before their companions can blink. Magnificent. Victor claps from his vantage point. The years haven't dulled your edge at all. But surely you've grown tired. 15 years is a long time to hide one's true nature. A pistol cracks in response. Marcus's white shirt ripples as he spins away from the bullet, closing the distance to the shooter in 3 liquid steps. The black sword knocks the gun flying while the saber's flat strikes nerve points in rapid succession. The gunman crumples, paralyzed but conscious. Second lesson, Marcus continues, never breaking stride. Firearms are useless against one who can read intent in the tension of a trigger finger. Dmitri snarls and signals to 3 men on his left. They spread out, trying to flank Marcus while staying just beyond his reach. Smart, but not smart enough. Marcus backs toward a stack of crates, seemingly giving ground. The first man feints low, while another swings high with a length of chain. Marcus's response is poetry in motion. The black sword pins the chain to a crate, while the saber weaves an intricate pattern that sends all 3 attackers stumbling into each other, their own weapons tangled hopelessly. Third lesson. Control. The battlefield's geometry. Marcus kicks a crate, sending it rolling into 2 more advancing thugs. A true swordsman turns terrain to his advantage. The remaining men begin to back away, fear finally overcoming their bravado. They've never seen anything like this. A man moving faster than seems possible. Every action precise and economical. Not a single wasted motion. Stand your ground, you cowards, Dmitri screams, drawing a long knife. He's just one old man. An old falcon, Victor corrects, leaning on the railing with evident enjoyment. Who has remembered how to hunt. Dmitri charges, knife slashing wildly. Marcus meets him with a complex series of cuts that seems to create a cage of steel around the younger man. Each desperate attack is turned aside with casual ease until Dmitri realizes he's been slowly backed into a corner. Fourth lesson. Marcus's blades cross at Dmitri's throat. Anger makes you predictable. Fear makes you sloppy. Either one will kill you. Enough playing with the children, Victor calls down. Ivan, remind our guest why he's here. The giant enforcer produces Bella's lace shawl, deliberately tearing it in his massive hands. The sound draws Marcus's attention for a fraction of a second, long enough for Dmitri to slash at his back. But Marcus has anticipated this, spinning away so the knife cuts only cloth. Final lesson, he says, and now there's steel in his voice. The saber blurs, and Dmitri screams as tendons in his knife hand are severed with surgical precision. Never mistake mercy for weakness. The remaining thugs break, fleeing toward the exits. Only Ivan stands his ground, drawing a massive cavalry saber that looks like a normal sword in his enormous grip. Time to die, old man. Marcus settles into a classical dueling stance, blades crossed before him. By all means, let us educate you as well. Ivan attacks with surprising speed for his size, his saber whistling through the air in powerful cuts that would cleave a man in 2. But Marcus isn't there to meet them. He flows around the giant's attacks like smoke, letting both swords move, in complex patterns that slowly wear down Ivan's stamina. You see, Marcus lectures as they fight, true swordplay is not about strength. He parries a mighty blow with seeming ease. It's about efficiency. Another attack turned aside. Economy of motion. A precise cut opens Ivan's sleeve. And above all, both swords move in perfect synchronization, trapping Ivan's blade and sending it flying. Perfect control. Ivan stumbles back, genuine fear in his eyes for the first time. Marcus's saber tip traces a thin line of blood across the giant's cheek, exactly matching the cut he gave Sheriff Cooper earlier. "Tell your men outside to disperse," Marcus commands. "Tell them that if I see a single one when I leave here, I will be significantly less gentle in my demonstrations." Ivan backs away, then turns to flee down the stairs. The warehouse falls silent, except for the moans of the wounded and unconscious. Victor's slow applause echoes from above. "Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And that was just the warm-up, wasn't it, my dear Falcon? Now." The sound of his rapier leaving its sheath rings through the air. "Shall we begin the true performance?" Marcus ascends the stairs with deadly grace, both swords ready. "No more games, Victor. This ends tonight." "Oh no, my friend." Victor's smile is razor-sharp in the lamplight. "This is just the beginning. The upper floor of the warehouse is a different world from the chaos below. Elegant carpets cover the rough wooden floors, and brass oil lamps cast a warm glow across walls lined with weapons, a collector's paradise of blades from across Europe. In the center of this impromptu salon, Bella sits bound to a chair, her eyes widening at the sight of her father's transformation. "Papa," she whispers, seeing him clearly for the first time. Not as the humble blacksmith she's known, but as something else entirely. His white shirt is marked with sword cuts but no blood, and his stance speaks of deadly grace rather than a craftsman's stoop. Victor moves to stand between them, his black silk fencing outfit a stark contrast to Marcus's simple attire. Family reunions are so touching. He raises his rapier in a formal salute. "But first, shall we discuss terms? I propose classical rules. First blood from the torso ends the match." "This is not a sporting event, Victor." Marcus's voice carries the chill of a winter dawn. "Release my daughter. Come now, where's your sense of ceremony?" The great Black Falcon, terror of Dresden's dueling circles, surely remembers the old forms. Victor begins to circle, his footwork impeccable. "Or did you forget everything when you fled Europe?" Marcus mirrors his movement, both swords held low. "I remember enough. Do you remember the Comte de Valois?" Victor's blade flicks out in a testing thrust. "They say he never walked again after your friendly match. Or Baron Steiner? The man drank himself to death after you humiliated him." Marcus parries the thrust with minimal movement. "Ancient history. Not to their families." Victor's smile turns predatory. "Not to those of us who studied your every bout, learned from your technique." Another probe, more aggressive. "You created a standard few could match. The pressure drove some men mad. Others like me made it stronger. Their blades meet in a complex exchange, steel singing against steel." Victor's rapier moves like a serpent, seeking gaps in Marcus's defense, while the twin swords create an intricate web of protection. "You're good," Marcus acknowledges, turning aside a particularly cunning attack. but you telegraph your intentions on your left shoulder. A master's critique. I'm honored. Victor launches a flurry of attacks, his blade seeming to multiply in the lamplight. But you're conserving energy, playing defensively. Age catching up, perhaps? Marcus responds with a combination that drives Victor back 3 steps. Or patience learned from years of heating steel to the perfect temperature. No more, no less than needed. The duel intensifies, both men moving through the space like dancers in a lethal ballet. Victor's style is flamboyant, aggressive, each attack designed to both kill and impress. Marcus fights with economy and precision, letting his opponent wear himself down against a defense that seems to have no openings. 15 years, Victor pants, sweat beginning to show on his brow. 15 years hiding in this backwater, pretending to be a simple craftsman. Was it worth it? Denying your true nature? You understand nothing. Marcus deflects a high cut and counters with a move that slices through a lamp cord, sending shadows dancing. A sword and a hammer both shape the world. The choice is in how we use them. Victor laughs, a sharp barking sound. Philosophy from the man who once cut through half the nobility of Dresden. Tell me, does your daughter know how many men you've killed? Bella knows who I am. Marcus's eyes flick to his daughter's face, seeing not fear, but fierce pride. All that matters. Then let her see you in your full glory. Victor launches his most complex attack yet, a combination that would have overwhelmed any lesser swordsman. But Marcus meets it with perfect calm, letting both blades move in harmony to create an impenetrable defense. You want to know why I left Europe? Marcus asks, suddenly taking the offensive. His swords begin to move faster, forcing Victor to give ground. Not because of the men I defeated, because of what I saw in their eyes. The same thing I see in yours now. The obsession. The need to prove themselves through blood. Victor's smile slips as he finds himself pressed back toward the wall of weapons. And yet, here you are, fighting again. The falcon returns to his true nature. No. Marcus's blades move in a pattern of devastating complexity. I fight now to protect, not to prove. The duel reaches its crescendo as both men demonstrate the full extent of their skills. Victor's rapier becomes a blur of motion, while Marcus's twin swords create patterns of steel that seem to defy possibility. The warehouse floor below falls silent as even the wounded stop to watch the deadly dance above. Suddenly, Victor's foot catches on a corner of the carpet. It's the smallest of mistakes, one that would be meaningless in a lesser fight. But at this level, against this opponent, it's fatal. Marcus's saber knocks Victor's blade wide while the black sword sweeps in for the kill. But at the last instant, Marcus pulls the strike, letting the blade kiss Victor's throat without drawing blood. It's over, Marcus says quietly. Victor's eyes blaze with fury and humiliation. The Black Falcon shows mercy. How disappointing. His left hand moves toward a hidden pistol in his waistcoat. Not mercy, Marcus corrects. Control. Both swords move in a complex crosscut that sends Victor's rapier spinning away and opens shallow cuts on both his arms. The difference between a craftsman and a killer. Victor stares at the twin cuts on his arms, watching blood darken his expensive silk sleeves. His face contorts through a series of emotions, disbelief, rage, and finally, a kind of manic glee. You think this is the end? That you've won? His laugh carries an edge of madness. The game is larger than you know, Black Falcon. In one fluid motion, Victor kicks over a lamp near Bella's chair. Oil spreads across the carpet as flames begin to lick at the dry wood. Let's see how the Master Swordsman handles this choice. Marcus's eyes narrow as he evaluates his options. The fire is spreading quickly, feeding on decades of dust and seasoned timber. Smoke already begins to curl toward the ceiling, and Bella struggles against her bonds. Your reputation or your daughter, Falcon? Victor backs toward a window, drawing a small derringer from his waistcoat. Save her, and I escape with tales of how the great black falcon has grown soft. Rush me and watch her burn. Your choice. Marcus's response is instantaneous. The black sword spins through the air, pinning Victor's coat sleeve to the wall just as he raises the derringer. His saber flashes once, precisely severing Bella's ropes. Run, he commands, already moving toward Victor, but Victor tears free of his pinned sleeve, tumbling through the window onto the warehouse's lower roof. The derringer barks, the shot going wide as Marcus dives for cover. Outside, they can hear horses approaching, Victor's reinforcements arriving too late for the main fight. Papa! Bella cries out as the flames climb higher. The smoke is getting thicker, making it hard to breathe. The back stairs. Marcus grabs his black sword from the wall. Go! I'll handle Victor! But, trust me, Liebchen. His voice softens for a moment. I'm done hiding who I am. Bella nods, understanding flowing between father and daughter. As she hurries toward the back stairs, Marcus moves to the window, evaluating the rooftop terrain with a practiced eye. Victor is already halfway across, heading for a gap between buildings where a horse waits below. Marcus follows, his boots finding secure purchase on the slick shingles. Years of climbing around his forge's roof for repairs serve him well now. The night air is clean after the smoke-filled room, and the moon provides ample light for what must be done. You disappoint me, Falcon, Victor calls back, still moving toward his escape route. The man I studied would never have shown mercy, never have wasted 15 years playing honest trade. You studied a legend, Marcus replies, closing the distance. But you never understood the man. Victor spins, firing his derringer again. Marcus deflects the bullet with his saber, a technique many claimed impossible, but one he's practiced in secret for 15 years. The look of shock on Victor's face is almost comical. Impossible. Victor throws the empty derringer aside. No one can. A blacksmith understands metal. Marcus interrupts, continuing his advance. Its speed, its weight, its song, everything is a matter of timing and precision. Victor draws a hidden blade from his cane, desperation making his movements sloppy. You're still living in the past. The world has no place for honorable men anymore. Look around you. Money rules everything now, not skill or honor. Their blades meet one final time, but it's barely a contest. Victor's form has deteriorated. With his composure, while Marcus moves with the same deadly grace as before. Within 3 moves, Victor's blade goes spinning into the darkness. Honor isn't about the world, Marcus says quietly, both swords now at Victor's throat. It's about the man. Below, they hear shouts as townspeople gather. The warehouse fire casts everything in a hellish orange glow, making their figures on the roof visible to all. Will's voice carries up. Master Thorne, the sheriff's coming with help. Victor glances toward the gap between buildings, his last escape route. Well, finish it. Prove you're still the Black Falcon. Marcus studies him for a moment. The Black Falcon would have killed you without hesitation. He lowers his swords. But I'm also Marcus Thorne, craftsman of Millbrook. My daughter is safe. Your men are defeated, and your operation is finished. That's enough. You soft-hearted fool. Victor lunges forward, producing a hidden knife, but Marcus is already moving. The saber's pommel cracks against Victor's temple with scientific precision, and the would-be crime lord crumples unconscious on the rooftop. As if on cue, Sheriff Cooper arrives with a posse of armed townsmen. They find Marcus carrying Victor's limp form down from the roof as the fire brigade works to contain the warehouse blaze. Bella runs to embrace her father, heedless of the soot and blood on his shirt. "Papa," she whispers, "I always knew you were more than just a blacksmith." Marcus holds her close. "I'm both, Liebchen. Always have been." He looks up at the gathered crowd, his friends and neighbors of 15 years, seeing him clearly for the first time. "Always will be." Will pushes through the crowd, carrying Marcus's leather apron from the forge. Without a word, he holds it out to his master. Marcus smiles, understanding the gesture's meaning. He dons the apron over his torn white shirt, letting both sides of his nature stand revealed at last. "Arrest that man!" Victor's voice cracks through the night as he regains consciousness in the sheriff's custody. "He's a wanted criminal in Europe. A killer. I demand." "Actually," Clara's voice rings out as she steps forward with a bundle of documents. "I have here testimony from the German embassy clearing Marcus Thorn, formerly known as Karl Weber, of all charges. It seems my father's last act before his death was ensuring his old friend's name was finally cleared." Victor's face goes slack with disbelief as his carefully laid plans crumble to ash, much like his warehouse headquarters behind them. Dawn breaks over Millbrook, painting Howe, the sky in shades of pink and gold. The smoldering remains of the warehouse send thin wisps of smoke into the morning air, while townspeople gather to survey the aftermath of the night's events. The street in front of Thorne's forge has become an impromptu meeting ground, with Sarah Foster distributing fresh bread and Clara serving coffee to the tired firefighters. Marcus stands at his forge's door, having exchanged his torn white shirt for his familiar work clothes. The saber and black sword hang openly on his wall now, no longer hidden relics, but proud testimony to a life fully lived. Bella sits nearby, watching as her father begins his morning routine of lighting the forge fire. The same routine she's witnessed countless times, but now seeing it with new understanding. "You never wanted me to know," she says softly, "about your past." Marcus tests the heat with a practiced hand. "I wanted you to grow up free from the weight of it. To know your father is a maker, not a fighter. But you were both all along." She moves to help him with the bellows, their familiar rhythm unchanged despite everything. "Every sword you forged, every lesson you taught, it was all part of who you really are." The forge's warmth begins to fill the workshop as Will enters, carrying fresh coal for the day's work. The young apprentice moves differently now, more aware of the deeper meaning behind every motion his master has taught him. "The tools are all accounted for, Master Thorne," Will reports, then hesitates. "Though I suppose I should call you Master Weber now?" Marcus shakes his head, smiling. "Thorne is the name I chose when I chose this life. Weber was my father's name, and Karl Weber died in Dresden 15 years ago." He picks up a hammer, feeling its familiar weight. Besides, a rose by any other name. Their conversation is interrupted by Sheriff Cooper's arrival. The lawman looks uncomfortable, his badge noticeably absent from his chest. "Marcus, that is, we need to talk about last night. About how Victor bought your silence." Marcus continues his work, not looking up. "Or about how you failed your oath to protect this town." Cooper's face reddens. "I've handed in my badge. But before I go, I need to say, I'm sorry." And thank you. The state police are already on their way to collect Victor and his men. They found enough evidence in the warehouse ruins to put them away for years. Marcus finally looks up, studying the former sheriff. Fear makes us forget who we are, Thomas. The trick is finding the courage to remember. As Cooper leaves, Clara approaches with a letter. From the German embassy in Washington. Father arranged it all before he died. Your full pardon, confirmation. Of your noble status, even your military honors restored. She smiles sadly. He always said the Black Falcon would fly again when he was needed most. Marcus takes the letter but doesn't open it. Instead, he places it in the forge fire, watching as it curls and blackens. The past is honored by how we live now, not by clinging to old glories. The morning progresses, and customers begin to arrive, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. Each one looks at Marcus differently now, seeing both the humble craftsman and the deadly swordsman in equal measure. But it's the quality of his work they discuss, the same expertise he's shown for 15 years. Sarah Foster brings a tray of fresh pastries, pausing to watch Marcus guide Will through the forging of a new plowshare. You know, she says thoughtfully, I always wondered why Heinrich chose you to teach Will. Now I understand. You were teaching him more than just metalwork. Everything teaches us something, Marcus replies, demonstrating the proper hammer stroke to Will. A sword teaches control. A forge teaches patience. A secret teaches humility. He checks the metal's color. But the greatest lesson is that we never stop learning who we are. As the morning wears on, Bella notices someone has painted a new sign for the forge. Below Thorne's Forge in smaller letters it reads, Quality work, honor in craft. The black falcon silhouette beside it seems to soar. Will you teach me? She asks suddenly. Not just about running the flower shop, but everything else? Marcus sets down his hammer, studying his daughter's face. Are you sure? That path isn't easy. Neither is growing roses, she smiles. But you taught me that anything worth doing takes dedication. She picks up a sword blank cooling on the rack. Besides, a thorn should know how to use what a thorn makes, shouldn't she? Marcus laughs, the sound full and free in a way the town has never heard before. Very well. We'll start with the basics. Stance, balance, and most importantly, control. He looks around his forge, at the life he's built, and the family he's found. After all, the greatest swordsman is not the one who wins every fight, but the one who knows when not to draw his blade, Will finishes, quoting one of his master's many lessons. The forge fire crackles, tools gleam on their racks, and the morning light streams through the windows. In this moment, Marcus Thorne, craftsman, swordsman, teacher, father, is finally, completely himself. Outside, Millbrook begins another day, forever changed by the night the Black Falcon spreads his wings again, yet ultimately saved by the heart of a simple blacksmith who understands that true strength lies not in the weapon, but in the hand that chooses when to use it. News travels fast in a small town, but even faster when the story involves a humble blacksmith defeating an entire criminal enterprise with nothing but skill and steel. By midweek, Millbrook is abuzz with activity as state police wagons transport Victor and his men to the capital for trial. The warehouse ruins become a macabre tourist attraction, with visitors from neighboring towns coming to see where the legendary duel took place. Inside the jail, Victor sits in his cell, his once immaculate clothes now wrinkled and stained. Deputy Harrison, temporarily serving as sheriff, watches as two federal marshals review the evidence found in the warehouse ruins. Ledgers detailing protection rackets across 3 states, correspondence with corrupt officials, and detailed plans for expanding their operation throughout Pennsylvania. "It's bigger than we thought," one marshal comments, flipping through a charred ledger. This Kovalev character had connections all the way to New York. Victor's hollow laugh echoes from his cell. "You understand nothing. I built an empire while playing at being a common thug. The Black Falcon didn't just stop a protection racket. He dismantled a network 15 years in the making." His eyes gleam with fevered intensity. But legends cast long shadows, and shadows attract darker things. The marshal ignores him, but Deputy Harrison feels a chill at the cryptic warning. Meanwhile, at Thorne's Forge, life attempts to return to normal, though normal has taken on a new definition. Marcus works his forge as always, but now students of swordplay come to watch him hammer steel, hoping to glimpse the deadly grace that defeated Victor's men. They leave disappointed, seeing only the measured movements of a master craftsman, not understanding that they're watching the very skills that made him legendary. Will's training has intensified. Each morning before the forge fires are lit, Marcus guides him through forms that blend swordplay with smithing. "The hammer and the sword," he explains, demonstrating a complex pattern. "Two tools that can create or destroy. The wisdom lies in knowing the difference." Bella has begun her own training, rising early to practice basic stances before opening her flower shop. She's moved her business closer to the forge, converting the old storage room into a new shop space. The sight of fresh roses in the forge's window becomes a symbol of how beauty and strength can coexist. Clara's Tavern has become the unofficial gathering place for those seeking to share tales of the night's events. Each retelling grows more elaborate, but Clara maintains the truth with quiet authority. "My father knew what he was doing," she tells her patrons, "when he helped Marcus build his new life here. Some men are meant to be legends, others to be craftsmen. The rare few can be both." One morning, a distinguished-looking gentleman arrives at the forge. His clothes and bearing mark him as European nobility, and he carries himself with the precise posture of a fencer. Marcus recognizes him. Immediately, Baron Klaus von Schreiber, his old fencing master from Dresden. "So," the Baron says, surveying the forge, "this is where the Black Falcon built his nest." Marcus continues working, but his hammer strikes carry a different rhythm. "You're a long way from Dresden, Baron." News of Victor's defeat reached interested parties. The Baron examines one of Marcus's finished swords with an expert's eye. Some are concerned about what other secrets might emerge. "The past is dead," Marcus says firmly. "I've built a new life here." The Baron nods thoughtfully. "Yes, I can see that. And perhaps that's for the best, though I must say..." He tests the sword's balance with practiced ease. "Your craft has improved. These are superior to anything you forged in Dresden. I learned that perfection comes from patience, not pride." Marcus takes the sword, returning it to its rack. "Was that not what you tried to teach me all those years ago?" "Indeed." The Baron smiles slightly. "Though I never expected you to learn it quite like this." He produces a sealed envelope. "The Dresden Academy sends its regards and its apologies. The circumstances that forced your departure have been clarified." Marcus doesn't take the envelope. "The Academy's opinion means nothing to me now. I measure my worth by different standards." As if to emphasize his point, Sarah Foster arrives with a broken cooking pot, followed by young Tommy Miller, asking about apprenticeship. The Baron watches as Marcus gives each the same careful attention he once reserved for noble clients. "You've changed, Carl," the Baron observes, using Marcus's old name. "I grew up," Marcus corrects him. "The Black Falcon was born from pride and ambition. Marcus Thorne was forged through humility and service." He holds the Baron's gaze. "Which do you think is stronger?" The Baron considers this, then places the envelope on a workbench. "The Academy's invitation remains open, should you ever wish to return as an instructor. But—" He looks around the forge again, seeing it with new eyes. "Perhaps you're teaching more important lessons here." After the Baron leaves, Will and Bella find their father staring at the unopened envelope. Without a word, he places it in a drawer alongside Clara's letter, honoring the past without being bound by it. That evening, as the forge fire dies down, Marcus takes out his old dueling saber for its nightly cleaning. But now the ritual feels different. Not the maintenance of a hidden weapon, but the caring of a tool that, like its owner, serves a higher purpose. "A sword is only as good as the heart that wields it," he tells his children, as they clean their practice blades beside him, "and a heart is only as strong as the principles it serves." The evening light catches the new sign outside. Thorne's Forge, quality work, honor in craft. Below it, the Black Falcon's silhouette seems to watch over the street, not as a symbol of deadly skill, but as a guardian of hard-won peace. 1 year later, Millbrook has changed in subtle but significant ways. The old warehouse has been rebuilt into a proper training hall, where the rhythmic sound of practice swords mingles with the ring of hammer on anvil from Thorne's Forge next door. The sign above the hall reads, "The Falcon's Nest," in elegant script, with School of Arts and Crafts beneath it. Inside the training hall, Marcus moves among his students, a mix of young apprentices learning both blade work and metalcraft. Will, now a journeyman smith himself, leads a group through basic forms, while Bella demonstrates more advanced techniques to her own students. The integration of artistry and combat, creation and protection, has attracted people from across the Chatham state. "Remember," Marcus calls out as he corrects a young apprentice's stance, "the sword and hammer share the same principles: control, precision, and above all, purpose." He guides the boy's hands. "A blade wielded without purpose is just violence. A hammer struck without purpose is just noise." The morning sun streams through high windows, catching the collection of weapons mounted on the walls, each one forged in Thorne's Forge, each telling its own story. Among them hangs Victor's rapier, a reminder of choices and consequences. In T, the forge next door, Sarah Foster's son Tommy, the newest apprentice, works the bellows while watching the more advanced students through the connecting door. The forge and training hall operate as one unified whole, just as Marcus's two lives have finally merged into a single, harmonious existence. Clara enters, carrying her usual basket of fresh bread and a stack of letters. "More inquiries," she says, setting them on Marcus's desk. 3 from Philadelphia, 1 from New York, and, she smiles, another from the Dresden Academy. Marcus takes the letters with a quiet laugh. "Still trying to lure the Falcon back to his old hunting grounds? Can you blame them?" Clara sorts through some practice equipment. "Your reputation has only grown since Victor's defeat. They say his network stretched further than anyone imagined. His arrest sparked investigations across 2 continents. Indeed, Victor's capture had revealed a web of corruption that reached from Pennsylvania to St. Petersburg. The evidence found in his ledgers had led to the arrest of corrupt officials, the the breakup of protection rackets, and the exposure of an international criminal conspiracy. Yet Marcus takes no pride in this. It was never about glory. The afternoon brings a special visitor, Judge Morrison from Philadelphia, who helped process Victor's case. He watches the training with keen interest, particularly the younger students learning the basics of both metallurgy and swordplay. Remarkable, the judge comments to Marcus. You're not just teaching them to fight, you're teaching them to think, to create, to understand the weight of their actions. Marcus nods, watching as Bella helps a young girl adjust her grip on both sword and hammer. The world changes, Your Honor. The days of duels and classical swordplay are fading, but the principles, discipline, honor, the marriage of skill, and wisdom, these are timeless. And needed now more than ever, Morrison agrees. Which is why I'm here. He produces an official-looking document. The state is establishing a special investigative office dealing with complex cases that require unique skills. We'd like your graduates to be considered for positions. Marcus takes the document but doesn't immediately open it. My students learn to prevent violence, not seek it out. Exactly why we want them, Morrison explains. They understand both action and restraint, creation and combat. Like their teacher, they know when to draw the blade and when to extend the hand. Later, that evening, as the training hall empties and the forge fire dims, Marcus sits in his office reviewing student progress notes. The walls around him tell the story of his journey. Newspaper clippings about Victor's arrest and conviction, letters of thanks from towns freed from protection rackets, and photographs of graduating students. Will enters, having finished closing the forge for the night. Master Thorne, there's something I've been meaning to ask. Marcus looks up, seeing not the uncertain boy who began as his apprentice, but a confident young man who has learned to balance strength with wisdom. What is it? The night you fought Victor, you could have killed him several times. Why didn't you? Marcus is silent for a moment, considering. Because the Black Falcon would have killed him without hesitation. But Marcus Thorne, he smiles, had learned something the Falcon never knew. What was that? That true mastery isn't about taking life, but enriching it. Every sword we forge, every student we teach, every skill we pass on, these are worth more than all the duels ever fought. As if to emphasize his point, the evening air carries the sound of hammering from the forge, where Tommy is finishing his day's work. The rhythm is still imperfect, but it carries the promise of improvement, of growth, of a legacy. Bella joins them, her training clothes replaced by a simple dress adorned with a rose from her shop. Papa, the new roses are blooming, red and black, just like you wanted. Marcus follows his children out into the garden between the forge and training hall. The roses climb a trellis, their colors a perfect blend of beauty and strength, much like the legacy he's built. Above them, carved into the arch connecting the two buildings, are words that sum up everything he's learned in his journey from legendary duelist to humble blacksmith to something greater than both. In the heart of a warrior, let there be craft. In the hands of a craftsman, let there be wisdom. In the soul of both, let there be honor. The sun sets on Millbrook, painting the sky in shades of fire and steel. From his forge, Marcus Thorne, once the Black Falcon, now something far more important, watches the next generation learn the lessons that took him a lifetime to understand. The swords on his wall catch the dying light, no longer symbols of deadly skill, but tools in service of a greater purpose. For in the end, the most crucial battles are not won with steel, but with the heart that guides it. Up next, You've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.